This Sunday, Georgia candidates in the race for U.S. Senate under fire.
Would you support some form of compensatory relief, not just to January 6ers like myself?
That's easy, yes.
Senator Ossoff really needs to think about his position. He has voted against Israel's interests.
Congressman Mike Collins and Democrat Jon Ossoff called out over new controversies.
And Atlanta transit leaders pick a permanent CEO to lead MARTA into a new era, they hope, of efficiency.
I truly believe we do have the best transit agency in the nation, and we need to live up to that mantra.
And special election candidates making their case to voters with an open seat in Congress now just days away from being filled.
Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
This Sunday, new flashpoints forming in Georgia's nationally watched U.S. Senate race.
With both candidates now under some fire. Good Sunday morning. I'm Doug Reardon.
And I'm Rick Fulbaum. Democratic incumbent Senator Jon Ossoff is back on the campaign trail this week. He's hosting a rally this afternoon in Atlanta as his fight to fend off Republican challenger Congressman Mike Collins intensifies. Collins is playing defense this week after a clip from a campaign stop in Savannah went viral. In it, the congressman was asked by a supporter who introduced himself as one of the January 6th Capitol rioters if he supports efforts from the Trump administration to compensate Americans like him whose, quote, lives were destroyed by the federal government.
Clearly, would you support either the Victims of Political Weaponization Fund, Compensation Fund, or some form of compensatory relief, not just to January 6ers like myself, but all Americans left, right, and center who have become victims of a weaponized political system?
A lot of things have been politicized and weaponized. And when the federal government harms you, then yes, they have a liability too. That's easy, yes.
The exchange came after President Trump's push for Congress to approve a $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund, as it was called, to compensate his political allies, even those convicted of attacking the U.S. Capitol. That program was shelved after intense bipartisan pushback, but Senator Ossoff called Collins' response to the question, quote, disgraceful. The Collins campaign then tried to clarify what the congressman was talking about. A spokesperson writing, quote, Mike Collins fully supports holding the government accountable when federal agencies abuse their power and believes Americans who have been wronged by the government ought to have a path to seek justice. The statement goes on to say Collins does not support a blank check fund or automatic taxpayer-funded payouts to anyone simply because they were prosecuted for January 6th.
And Collins also found himself running defense for his own family recently after it was revealed his son-in-law is a social media influencer who spreads anti-Semitic and often white nationalist messages. But
Senator Ossoff, who is Georgia's first ever Jewish senator, isn't getting a perfect score from Atlanta's Jewish community either. In an open letter to Ossoff, Michael Morris, publisher of the Atlanta Jewish Times and a Mike Collins supporter, accused the senator of lying to his constituents.
The publisher accusing Ossoff of supporting Israel sometimes, but failing to support the country when it often matters most. It's a message that has now become something of a flashpoint in this important race. What prompted you to write this piece in the first place?
On almost every tangible vote, he has voted against Israel's interests.
Michael Morris is the publisher of the Atlanta Jewish Times. Last week, Morris penned a letter to Jewish Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff, accusing him of voting for Israel in spirit but not in substance. When a rhetorical bill reaches the floor, his letter reads, "You vote with heartfelt sympathy for Israel." But when a bill that offers Israel tangible strategic support, munitions, rifles, bombs, military and financial assistance, your record is abysmal. All that heartfelt sympathy, the letter goes on to say, is smoke and mirrors. Does this feel like a bit of a betrayal for you because Senator Ossoff is, of course, Jewish?
I think voting matters. I think their voting record speaks more volumes than what politicians say when they're trying to get elected or when they're defending themselves as to why they voted one way or another.
Morris says based on what he's hearing from friends, family, and readers, Ossoff should reconsider his voting stance on military support for Israel. But on the other side of the race, there are concerns from the Jewish community too. Congressman Mike Collins, Ossoff's Republican challenger, was recently in the spotlight, forced to answer questions about his son-in-law, David Allen Shear, an online influencer who repeatedly expresses white nationalist and even anti-Semitic views in his videos.
We're going to talk about who God's chosen people are and why I believe it is not the Jews.
Weeks after the discovery was first reported, Atlanta News First asked Collins about the content.
You know, we've fully addressed that, but John Ossoff refuses to disavow these Democrat socialist movements in our country. John Ossoff should answer for why he supported ending cash bail, why he supported the open borders, why he supported these radical anti-Israel extremists. These aren't Georgia values, y'all.
Collins then abruptly ended the press conference and days later further distanced himself from his son-in-law's videos. But for many Jewish constituents in Georgia, it wasn't enough.
He's not disavowing him, he just doesn't want to talk about it.
Larry Auerbach is a Jewish voter and can't imagine supporting Collins over Ossoff in November.
It is ironic at best that the Atlanta Jewish Times would attack Ossoff because his voting record isn't 100% down the line with the government of Israel's request, and not worry about the fact that Mike Collins has had his own anti-Semitic comments.
But Moore says while he has concerns about anti-Semitism in the world, for him, it comes down to what you say versus what you do.
His son-in-law is not voting. He's in a tough position, but the truth is his record reflects what he is going to do in office.
And we should note that Ossoff did vote in favor of a July 2025 bill that provided $20 million to Israel for aid. We reached out to the campaign for comment. They offered nothing further to us.
Joining us now, our panel this week. Jason Shepard is the former chairman of the Cobb County Republican Party. Also, Fred Hicks, Democratic political strategist and president of the Hicks Evaluation Group. Gentlemen, thanks for going on the record and joining us this Sunday. And Fred, let me start with you. And we heard from the publisher of the Atlanta Jewish Times. How big of an issue do you think this is for the campaign? And he's not responding to it. Is that the right move, do you think?
So listen, so I can't speak for the Jewish community, but what I can say is that I know gaslighting when I see it. The reality is that John Ossoff adopted a hostage after October 7th. We know that John Ossoff, as we mentioned, he voted in favor of aid to Israel, not just this year, but also in 2025. We know that John Ossoff has been very open about and proud about being Georgia's first Jewish senator ever. What we also know is that Mike Collins' campaign is struggling. We know that he lost the support of Senator Jeff Flake, a former Republican former senator. He lost just last week to the support of two Republican mayors in Georgia. And we heard that the Secretary of State spokesperson has also said that he is too damaged to recover. So his campaign is reeling, and I think they're trying to find some sort of grounding, and it shouldn't work.
And Jason, of course, Mike Collins had his own controversy this week as well. Not a very good week for these Senate candidates, but we just heard Collins there suggesting that he might support some sort of compensatory fund for January 6th, people who were convicted in that. And his campaign, of course, said he was speaking more broadly, but that's not the way people are taking it. So if you were in an advisory role there, how would you kind of get him through this?
Well, it's easy. He should have on day one. He should have immediately, within 24 hours of that, gone on TV and simply said, anyone who touches a police officer belongs in prison, not on payroll. This fund has been blocked by Republican U.S. senators, and Mike Collins doesn't need to mention January 6th again. That is what he says. He says anyone who puts their hands on a police officer belongs in prison and not on payroll.
I mean, it would track with the message, certainly. And Fred, at the end of the day, we know consistently in polling that the economy is still the #1 issue. People are very concerned about this ongoing war in the Middle East. Are these the issues that voters really care about, and should the candidates consider that?
Well, I think that every day that John Ossoff can have Mike Collins on the defensive about something other than the issues that voters care about is a good day for Senator Ossoff. And to Jason's point, if I were advising Collins, I agree with Jason. Give a straight answer and pivot to other issues. But right now, he's being dogged by one allegation after another, and that's putting him at a disadvantage.
Jason, it's a little difficult to go out and talk about your proposals, what you want to do when you have to answer all of these questions, that are causing a distraction. So how do you get around that? Because polls have shown that Collins is behind in this race. What does he have to do to make up this lost ground?
And Collins really needs to get on message. He needs to start telling voters not only what he will do as a U.S. Senator that's different from John Ossoff, but pointing out Ossoff's inconsistencies. We have the letter from the editor of the Jewish Times, the publisher of the Jewish Times, that John Ossoff's is with Israel when it's easy to be with Israel. But for the most part, with very few exceptions, he's voting with the Bernie Sanders wing of his party when it comes to Israel, then coming down to Georgia and saying, I'm behind Israel 110%, and that's simply not true if you want to talk about gaslighting. He votes one way in Washington, he tells his voters and supporters in Georgia something completely different, and Mike Collins needs to point that out, but Mike Collins needs to also be aggressive in defending and explaining himself. The issue with his son-in-law. That should have been handled day one. You don't get to choose your family. And Mike Collins has repeatedly condemned what his son-in-law has put on. But he didn't, and he let that fester and lost a month in campaigning as a result.
Fred, I see you shaking your head.
Well, you don't get to choose your family, but you do get to choose your staff. He's hired not one, but two problematic staff members. He had to let his first one go, and his second one was just caught in private communications with Nick Fuentes, a noted anti-Semitic individual and supporter of January 6th. So the reason why he's struggling to explain this is because he likes this.
No, and you're completely right on those. Those things need to be handled up front. And on his current chief of staff, that was something that was brought up in the primary, and the voters then went with him over Derek Dooley.
I think that's notable as well. Thank you both. Keep that energy. We'll be right back. Next on the record, a new permanent leader for MARTA. What we are learning about the man now working to push Atlanta's transit authority in the right direction. Welcome back. If you can believe it, we're a few months away now from the midterm elections, but this morning, city leaders in Atlanta are already looking ahead to 2028. This month, they approved a resolution pledging up to $36 million in funding for the 2028 Democratic National Convention to be held here in our city. Atlanta is one of 5 host cities on the short list to potentially host the upcoming nominating convention. We are alongside Boston, Chicago, Denver, and Philadelphia. Back in April, party leaders visited our city for an official tour. Mayor Andre Dickens told them then that Atlanta's status as the only potential host city situated in a battleground state for sure makes it the no-brainer choice to host the convention. Under the resolution they passed, approved by the city council earlier this month, the funding would come from excess amounts of Atlanta's hotel tax. The measure also allows the mayor and the chief financial officer to authorize any other necessary agreements, and it secures MARTA as the convention's official bus provider. The 2028 Republican National Convention, we know, will be held in Houston, Texas.
Right now, a new offer on the table from Fulton County to buy the Atlanta City Detention Center and potentially relieve overcrowding issues at the long-plagued county jail. Commissioners are offering to pay $56.5 million to buy the city's jail. It comes after Atlanta's mayor put the price tag at $80 million for the county to take control of the city's detention center. The mayor said his offer would have saved taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars compared to the county's plan to buy a new $1.3 billion facility. But county leaders said that offer came with other strings attached, and they believe that that would have cost Fulton County more money in the end. District 3 Commissioner Dana Barrett told us the new deal from the county will save the city about $27 million a year. She also told us it's a deal that's been in the works for nearly 2 decades.
We've been trying, as our letter stated, to buy this jail for 17 years. And I think this has been a long-standing issue in Fulton County, our overcrowded jail and the inhumane conditions. And I think this is a service and a benefit to the entire county population. If we want our justice to improve, our public safety to improve, we need a functioning justice system, and that includes a safe jail.
The mayor's office says they plan to respond to the offer in the near future.
And this Sunday, after a year-long nationwide search, MARTA has named a new CEO and general manager, and to many, it's a familiar face.
The Transit Authority hired internally, picking Jonathan Hunt, who has been serving as the interim GM for the last year. Atlanta News First senior reporter Patrick Quinn joins us here in the studio on how MARTA and Hunt are now working to lead the agency forward.
A big decision, and one Atlanta official said this was the most consequential decision that MARTA has made in the last decade. Jonathan Hunt named the CEO and general manager of MARTA, and leadership inside MARTA headquarters. They said that MARTA that you know right now is about to look a lot different.
To be named general manager and CEO of MARTA is an incredible honor.
Jonathan Hunt beat out transit execs Leroy Jones in Washington, D.C., and Cleveland Ferguson III from Jacksonville. This move by MARTA, though, seemed far from likely a year ago. Last August, MARTA board chair Jennifer Ide told me it was time for MARTA to look outside of Atlanta for a new CEO.
I think it is the right time for MARTA to bring in some new thought, experience, perhaps a different approach.
Clearly, in 12 months, that sentiment changed. I asked Hunt, does his hire reflect Marta sticking with the status quo? I then jumped into his defense.
Will we see the same Marta under your leadership?
I'm going to answer on Jonathan's behalf for a minute, because I turned to him after the vote and I said, Jonathan, it's now day one. We believe in him, that he can deliver exceptional. But where we are today isn't good enough for the city of Atlanta.
Also a year ago, Hunt said he did not want the permanent job. Today he said because of the support he got from the Marta leadership team over the last year, he changed his tune. He said his top priorities are carrying forward the momentum from the World Cup, improving transparency with the public, and strengthening accountability of his agency. For the Marta board, they have one major focus:
ridership, ridership, ridership.
Hunt also said strengthening the relationship with the city of Atlanta is of top importance to get projects done. In a statement, Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens said, quote, GM Hunt is prepared to hit the ground running, address the challenges facing the agency, and strengthen faith and confidence in the very core of Marta's mission. A move not desired by Marta out of the gate. Now CEO Jonathan Hunt ready to steer Marta forward.
Delivering exceptional service is the standard.
While the board announced Hunt as the new general manager and CEO, he's not under contract right now. They will now negotiate, Hunt and the board, to figure out how long and how much he will be paid to take on this new role.
Yeah, and of course, they're still paying the old CEO. But this was kind of an agonizing decision, I think, for riders and for people on the board. What's the reaction that you're hearing to Hunt's hiring?
All types of reaction. Some within the city who have worked with Hunt, they like Hunt. They like the direction that he started, and they said, all right, let's keep this momentum going. For transit advocates, it's a completely different reaction. My phone's been blowing up. A lot of people disappointed. They said this was an opportunity for Marta to grab a visionary leader, maybe from another city, maybe outside of the transit world, and really flip Marta on its head and try and grab new riders, not just those that necessarily need it every day, but the every once in a while riders, really transform the system. This move, we'll see how it plays out, but it's been mixed reaction for sure.
A little more of the same, they feel.
Right.
Yeah.
So the transit agency actually coming off a high after the World Cup when they got a lot of praise. I rode Marta to the fan festival. It was a pleasure, a breeze, but they've also come under federal scrutiny, federal investigation after some recent violence back in the spring. What's the latest on the investigation?
Right, so Marta's handed over all their documents, all their policies around security, how much spending they're putting into security. Now the federal officials, they have that. They're going to review it. They're going to see if anything needs to change within Marta. They're also, Marta says, as of yesterday, they're still meeting with federal officials about how to improve their safety profile. But to your point about the World Cup, we just learned yesterday that Type 1 crimes, these are the most violent of crimes. They were down 45% over that month-long period of the World Cup. So a lot of people felt a new Marta during the World Cup. And yes, under new leadership, they're hoping to continue that momentum.
And of course, we were coming into the World Cup with a couple of really high-profile, as you said, Type 1 crimes. And so that was, I think, a sigh of relief for many people. But they used the word exceptional, the board did, when they looked ahead to what they said they wanted Marta to be. What metrics and kind of what benchmarks do you think they're using to define that?
I've heard this a million times. Jonathan Hunt will say it many more times. They want a clean, reliable, safe system. They want bread and butter. They want it just, it doesn't need to be fancy. They just want to get the job done. They want people to be able to step on Marta, a bus or a train, know what to expect every single time. So they want that reliability certainly to be improved. They want ridership to go up. Ridership has not returned from pre-pandemic levels. Ridership was way higher before the pandemic. We haven't chased those down quite yet. So, and then the new trains, they got to get on board. They're supposed to be here in June. We'll see if they're here by the end of the year. The fare gates, they need to be fixed, all of them replaced. That still hasn't happened. That should happen around October. By the end of October, they should be done. So there's some big projects that need to be completed. And then, yes, they just need to focus on the X's and O's, the everyday things to kind of get some of those riders and keep them on board.
Yeah, be on time and get them there safe.
That's it.
Thank you, Patrick.
Sure.
All right, still ahead on the record. Every seat in the Georgia State Legislature is on the ballot this fall. And this morning, a new push from Democrats to try to gain some power under the Gold Dome.
And big expectations from public health workers in Metro Atlanta as a new leader prepares to take the reins at the CDC.
Welcome back. This Sunday, a call for change at the Atlanta-based Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Yeah, big one at that. Public health workers in Atlanta say that they're hoping new leadership will help turn the tide at the nation's signature health agency. Employees at the agency say they've been in a state of turmoil since the start of President Trump's second term, when the administration laid off hundreds of workers. But union leaders say they're hopeful things could change once the agency's new director, Erica Schwartz, takes the reins.
A new CDC director has the opportunity to turn the tide. We as a union, we ask Erica Schwartz to work collaboratively with us to protect our nation's public health. All of us, we are anxious, and we're more than willing to work with leadership to get the agency back on solid footing.
Also this morning, thousands of disabled Georgians and their families are holding their breath.
A memo from the Justice Department is now threatening to wipe out their legal right to live independently. Atlanta News First Abby Kasoris explains.
The landmark civil rights battle that kept disabled people out of institutions for decades started right here in Atlanta. Now that lifeline is on the chopping block.
More space than I could ever use.
10 years. That's how long Nick Papadopoulos waited for this exact moment to live on his own.
It was terrible. It was scary. It was like a horror movie.
Nick spent nearly all of his 40s locked away inside of a sterile nursing home. Now at 49, he's reclaimed his freedom. A waiver pays for daily caregivers to help him bathe, get dressed, and manage his insulin. It's the kind of hands-on support most of us take for granted. But for Nick, it's the difference between a life of dignity and being locked away. But a new Justice Department memo is threatening to drag others backwards.
I would rather die than go back there.
The memo argues federal law doesn't actually force states to prioritize home care. It leaves it entirely up to states to decide if they want to fund independence or push people back into confinement. Right now, there are more than 7,800 disabled Georgians fighting for the same freedom Nick waited a decade for.
So this guy essentially lived in what he called a gulag. I mean, it sounded like he was in jail, and there was no crime committed. He had a disability, he needed support.
Now Nick is using his freedom to go to church, chase his dreams, and serve his community. Things he says are impossible behind closed institutional doors.
I can't do God's work in there. I can't touch lives like I touch them out here.
Now national groups, including the American Association of People with Disabilities, condemning the decision and looking at legal options. In Atlanta, I'm Abby Kasoris.
Still to come, high-profile endorsements and major policy initiatives, as well as new polling numbers, the latest in the race for governor here in Georgia, next on The Record.
Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
Well, this Sunday, candidates in the race for governor are working to win over voters who are still on the fence as the midterm elections inch closer. Good Sunday morning. I'm Doug Reardon.
And I'm Rick Fulbaum. There is some new polling, and it shows that the race is virtually tied, with Democrat Keisha Lance Bottoms holding a slight lead at 46.4% over her opponent, Republican Rick Jackson's 44.9%. More than 7% of respondents say they are still undecided, and Bottoms' lead falls within the poll's margin of error.
And it was a very busy week on the campaign trail for Rick Jackson, who rolled out a new policy initiative in Atlanta's Sweet Auburn district. The billionaire CEO's Legacy Corridor Initiative, as he calls it, aims to support small businesses in historic neighborhoods across Georgia. It's by freezing property taxes, deploying hands-on state navigators, and helping longtime tenants buy their storefronts. Jackson said it's about making Georgia the best state for all entrepreneurs, including Black and minority-owned businesses.
On a street like this, the wealth is in the deed. Everything else is just rent. You can run a good business for 30 years and have nothing to pass on to your kids because somebody else owned the building the whole time. But being the #1 state for business means nothing if it doesn't apply to all our businesses in all our neighborhoods.
The other candidate for the race for governor, Democrat Keisha Lance Bottoms, is gaining support from outside of Georgia. The former Atlanta mayor is getting the support from a pair of potential 2028 presidential hopefuls. Former U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg just officially endorsed the Bottoms campaign.
And another prominent Democrat throwing her support behind Bottoms and potentially offering up some advice for the future is Governor Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan. The Democrat joined Bottoms on Friday during a campaign stop in Marietta and told voters why she's supporting the former Atlanta mayor in the race for governor.
It's important that we have leaders who know how to help people keep more money in their pocket, to help people get access to health care. That's why I'm here with Mayor Bottoms. She is a phenomenal leader. She's proven, she's got the receipts.
Mayor Bottoms also took a moment to discuss her opponent Rick Jackson's new initiative to boost small businesses and what she says her plans are to help minority business owners if elected.
So what I'll say is that our businesses need support. And I have a record of that from my time as mayor, from extending grant opportunities, low interest loans, administrative support to our small businesses. I'll do that, God willing, when I'm elected governor of the state, and it won't just be for a photo op. It'll be because it's necessary.
Right now, Democrats are hoping that having Keisha Lance Bottoms on the ballot in November will help them pick up a little power at the state capitol. The nationally run Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee sees this year as a prime opening with competitive Senate and gubernatorial races at the top of the ticket here in our state. Republicans currently have an 18-seat majority in the Georgia State House. Democrats are targeting 5 of those districts currently under GOP control.
And that includes House District 44. Healthcare advocate Danielle Bell is fighting to unseat Marietta Republican Don Parsons, who served in the legislature since 1995. Over in Gwinnett County, it's Democrat Adam Cleveland. He's an attorney and a small business owner who wants to flip House District 48 blue. He is challenging incumbent Republican Representative Scott Hilton in that district. And in District 53, Sandy Springs Republican Deborah Silcox has served for almost a decade, but Democrat Beth Fuller thinks it's now time for a change. Fuller is a public health official who worked for the Atlanta-based CDC for 10 years before she lost her job during the Trump administration's DOGE era of layoffs.
In Georgia's 99th House District, Michelle Kang, a first-generation Korean-American nonprofit leader and mother, is fighting to flip a seat that's currently held by Gwinnett County Republican Matt Reeves. And in House District 105, former state rep Farouk Mughal wants to make his return to the state house. He's making a play to unseat Beaufort Republican Sandy Donatucci.
And over in the state Senate, the GOP, they hold a 10-seat majority. Democrats fighting to turn 3 of those seats blue. In Georgia's 37th district, West Cobb Democrat Darcy Castro is fighting to get her foot in the door and unseat Ackworth Republican Ed Setzler, who served in the General Assembly since 2005. In District 42, it's a wide-open race in Henry County. Pastor Eric Lee is fighting to fill the seat left open by State Senator Brian Strickland, who is now running to become Georgia's next Attorney General. Republican Brett Dunn is on the ballot in that race as well. And in Georgia's 48th district, small business owner Laura Mavarshan is running against State Senator Sean Still. Still, a Sewanee Republican, has served in the state Senate since 2023. He was one of more, if you remember, than a dozen people indicted on election meddling charges alongside President Donald Trump in Fulton County.
And we're back now with our panel. Fred, let's talk about the governor's race. I know from talking to political strategists that when a candidate cannot stay on message, it drives them crazy. Mayor Bottoms, though, has been hammering away healthcare. She's really hanging her hat on this issue. Is it going to be productive and successful for her?
Well, I think it is a key part of a successful message because we know that affordability is the #1 issue for Georgians, and the #1 driver of affordability is healthcare and Medicare costs. And so when you're running against a healthcare executive who has a little bit of a stink around him, around how he's handled his business, I think it's very smart for her to do that. We'll see. I mean, right now the polls have her in the lead, and that's pretty good for a Democrat at this point. But hopefully it'll hold for her.
Yeah, and Jason, on the other side of things, we see Rick Jackson trying to boost this initiative to really help out entrepreneurs in what we know are historically underserved and historically minority neighborhoods all across Georgia, and that includes the Sweet Auburn district. Is this a good play for him to try and go get voters who may not be thinking about the Republican Party all the time?
Absolutely. What we had was a Republican gubernatorial candidate step onto Auburn Avenue in the Sweet Auburn district and announce a plan that on day one, as governor, he will sign an executive order creating special districts in 6 cities. That doesn't happen with Republicans. And we have to look at the area. You know, who's been running the district over the last 50 years? It's been a Democrat mayor. It's been a Democrat county commission, Democrat member of Congress. And the result is what you can see from the sidewalk. Businesses boarded up. So by actually not launching this initiative to really revitalize these areas, make sure that the storefront owners can own their business, that the property taxes will be frozen so we can have economic revitalization in the area. That's a very strong message, especially for a Republican.
Yeah, let's talk about some of these Gold Dome races, Fred, because they don't always get the attention that the governor's races and the Senate races do, but they're really important. And this year for Democrats especially because we've seen some slimming margins over the years. We're under 20 in both houses now for the balance of power. Do Democrats have a real shot this year of closing that gap or maybe eliminating it altogether?
Well, I think that we absolutely have to. Because as Jason can attest, right, Republicans in the early 2000s invested heavily in state legislatures, and it paid off during the Obama years. They were able to block a lot of the president's policies at that point in time. And so it's taken Democrats now about 20 years to play catch up with this. And looking ahead, if Rick Jackson is going to be governor, we are going to absolutely need more votes in legislature to stop some of the things or to amplify good policies that he's trying to do. And if Mayor Bottoms becomes governor, then she's absolutely going to need a legislature to hold down and help her out as she's going through the process of governing. Either way,
it's pretty clear that Democrats smell some blood in the water here. We have a president whose approval ratings are very low. We have very competitive races here at the very top of the ticket. What can Republicans do in order to hold on to their majority and maybe even grow it?
Well, Republicans need to get the message out. Democrats have a talking point on affordability. Republicans actually have a record. In the past legislative session, the Republicans have worked to once again reduce property taxes, reduce the income tax. In fact, the property tax was mostly blocked by Democrats who wanted more money for government and less money for people trying to make ends meet, paying for these groceries. So Republicans have a very strong message that they need to get out. And typically Republican and local candidates in general run better than the top of the ticket. And that's why Scott Hilton can win a seat that was carried by Kamala Harris. It's those local issues, it's the local knowledge, and it's also those connections within the local community, as well as the message. And Republicans need to stay on it. However, Fred will agree with me on this. There is a warning sign for Republicans. Democrats have made gains in each of the last 5 election cycles in the Georgia General Assembly. But the Democrats still have a long way to go if they want to take the majority.
And why is that? Why are we seeing all of a sudden, right? You mentioned for 20 years, people have looked at Georgia's legislature and been able to discern very clearly that it is a Republican legislature. Why is it all of a sudden now starting to trend this way?
Well, because the affordability crisis rests solely at the feet of Republicans. Republicans have been in charge of Georgia for more than 20 years in the governor's mansion and since 2006 in terms of the legislature. And so any of these issues that we're talking about, they really happen under Republican leadership, and they need to own that. Even when you talk about this property tax issue, the reason why Democrats block that is because property taxes support things that Republicans purport to support, like law enforcement, like education, like streets and local governance. You can't have that if you get rid of property taxes.
Jason, anything on your end?
Well, we're not saying give them property tax. We're saying moving how we actually have taxes and spreading the burden out, so it's not so much on each individual family struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah.
We have a plan, and we've tried to execute it, and sometimes been blocked by the Democrats.
Yeah. Well, we're going to see what the voters think in a couple of months now. Thank you both. And still ahead on the record, another special election here in Metro Atlanta. Another one. Voters now casting their ballots to decide who they want to replace a longtime public servant in Congress.
On the record this Sunday, a special runoff election in Georgia's 13th congressional district. Voters in parts of Newton, Rockdale, Clayton, DeKalb, Gwinnett, and Henry counties are heading to the polls in that race.
Early voting opened this weekend in the special runoff race to replace the late Congressman David Scott in the U.S. House of Representatives. His office has sat empty since his sudden passing back in April. Congressman Scott's daughter, Marcy Scott, and former Gwinnett County School Board Chair Everton Blair are fighting to fill that seat. For the temporary post in Congress, only a few months they'll serve until that November election places someone permanently. Last month, these two faced off on a ballot with 3 other candidates. Scott and Blair were the top 2 vote getters, but neither received a majority, so the race is now in a runoff. And I spoke to both of the candidates about their runoff campaigns, the late congressman, and what their plans are if they make it to Congress. Voters in Georgia's 13th congressional district started voting in a special election this week. After the sudden passing of longtime Representative David Scott back in April, the area that includes parts of Gwinnett, DeKalb, Clayton, Henry, Newton, and Rockdale counties has been without representation in Congress ever since. On the ballot are Everton Blair, the one-time chair of the Gwinnett County School Board, and Marcy Scott, the late congressman's daughter, now picking up the mantle her father carried for more than 2 decades in Congress. The Atlanta resident has never held office, but says being on the campaign trail is nothing new to her.
I've been running campaigns and running with my dad every 2 years of my life, literally.
If elected, she says, while it'll be case by case, voters can expect her by and large to throw her support behind the same policies that her dad did.
I can't say I'm going to vote that exact same way, but he was pretty much the same way that I would, tend to vote.
But on the other side of the race, Blair says voters are craving something new. You say you want to be a different kind of candidate than Representative Scott.
If we want to change course and if we want better outcomes, we've got to pick different leaders.
His vision for the district includes a focus on education and making connections with constituents instead of seeming out of reach, like he says some politicians can feel.
I want to communicate early and often, and I want people to have kind of an inside look as what even does a member of Congress even do.
Blair knows after 23 years of David Scott's representation in Congress, battling a familiar name on the ballot won't be an easy task. You are combating a very, very recognizable name in the district.
Frankly, this seat should be earned. It should not be passed down, and our elections should be free and fair.
Even Marcy Scott agrees. In an interview the day after the July special election where Scott and Blair both advanced, Scott told us she's hoping voters put their faith in more than just her last name.
I think that has a lot to do with it, but I think even more importantly, they saw me in the community. They put a name with a face. It wasn't just somebody taking advantage of their last name.
The special election will pick Scott's successor only for a few months until a separate general election in November finds his replacement permanently. Neither Scott nor Blair are the candidates in that race, but both feel there's no time served too short to make a difference.
I know this will be for a short period of time, but there's no amount of time that you're serving that's too insignificant or too short or too small to make a huge impact.
And again, early voting in that special runoff election continues tomorrow, and it runs through this Friday, the 21st. Election day itself is next Tuesday, August 25th. And you can learn more about the candidates in that race on the Atlanta News First app. Just scan the code right there on your screen to download it for free. We'll be right back.
And we're back for one last segment with our panel. And this morning, the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, are expanding their presence in the metro. They just opened a new office in Atlanta's Little Five Points neighborhood. Leaders within the party say the space will be a permanent home for the chapter's political organization, labor organizing, and membership development. All right, Fred, DSA, we've seen them sort of take hold in certain parts of the country. I mean, legitimately, how much power could they potentially have here in Georgia?
I think that most power when you're dealing with like a new kind of group starts at the local level. And so I don't expect that DSA thinks they'll be able to play in the gubernatorial race, but I think keep an eye on 2029 and when you have the municipal races, even 2027 when you have the Atlanta school board races, that's where we might see them try to exert a little bit of influence.
And while the DSA comes to town, former Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is making waves herself for something very interesting. The former Trump ally is gaining interest after social media posts where she characterized the nation's two-party political system as, quote, total failures, and posed alongside other anti-Trump Republicans, we'll call them, including former Fox News anchor Tucker Carlson and Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie, where Greene wrote, quote, the movement has begun. We've all been wondering, of course, right, guys, what her next move is going to be. What do you think about this idea of Marjorie Taylor Greene supporting something other, Jason, than a two-party system here in the U.S.?
Well, we see other parties really act as spoilers. We look back into 1992, Ross Perot and the Reform Party got 19% of the national vote, did not receive a single electoral vote, but really cost the Republican Party, George H.W. Bush, a re-election and put Bill Clinton into office. You go back through history, whether it was the Bull Moose Party, whether it was the Progressive Party, it was the Socialist Party. These parties have acted as, or the Green Party in the 2000 election for president.
Ralph Nader.
Ralph Nader. They act as spoilers, and there's really no difference. I mean, there's really, all these come as forms of caucuses breaking with the traditional party. And there's two ways to do it. You can either leave and play the spoiler, or you can do what the Democrat Socialists are trying doing and actually take over the party.
Yeah, and Fred, give us the reason behind that. Why do you think that we see this push on both sides of the aisle to kind of move away from this more establishment style of politics, if you will?
Well, contrary to what Jason just said, the DSA is not taking over the Democratic Party.
Yet.
But what you are seeing is, to remind Jason that the Tea Party started as a revolt against George Bush in 2007, 2008, and then we saw this progressive movement and DSA kind of pop up in the later years. And so what happened, what we're seeing is that Americans, regardless of party, are tired of the politics as usual, playing towards big business and not towards individual people. And when you're seeing on both sides is push against that and saying, hey, what about me? What about my family? I'm not a talking point. I have a real life.
Jason, you're a political science professor, so how would you explain this to your students? Because we've got these sort of on the far left and on the far right. Why are people sort of splintering in that direction?
Well, Fred kind of brought up the point of the Tea Party. There's always been sort of these caucus movements within the parties themselves. When you're looking at a party that's trying to get 50 plus 1% of the vote, you need a broader coalition. So there are groups within those coalitions. The question is, do they break off and try to form their own party? That's what Marjorie Taylor Greene's talking about. Or do they try to exert influence within the party, like the Democrat Socialists, or really like the Tea Party as well, within the Republican Party back during that period, or sort of the MAGA movement within the Republican Party. So there's two ways of doing it. But factions and caucus groups, especially within the party, have always been part of the American experience. It's going to be in any system where you actually have freedom and liberty, because these issues are driven by people's opinions and beliefs. And the ability to express them in a free society is what creates them.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. And that is our show for this week. Again, thanks to our guests, Fred Hicks and Jason Shepard.
And thanks to you, as always, for watching. There are 79 days.
79?
Yeah, we're scrolling them on the wall until the midterms. We'll see you back here next Sunday.